Hello my dear YouTuber friends, and I hope you're all keeping well. Welcome to this new video, which is Back to Basics Part 4. Now I'm going to be talking about in this video some more advanced autopilot functions, things like flight level change mode, heading mode, and the big one people are asking for, ILS approach into your chosen runway. There's a bit of a caveat with that, I'll mention that in the video. What you should be doing is going firstly to the first video, back to basic 1, it's basic handling, things like trimming, and then onto video 2, basic autopilot functions. Don't just jump into this video and start learning from here. Go to the other videos. I've linked one of the videos in the top right for you, the first one. At least go and watch that first and then go and watch the second video before coming on to this part. I'm back on the PC. I thought I would mix things up a bit, and I'm actually using my Velocity 1 flight yacht system, which I thought a few of you might find interesting. Anyway, enough of an intro, let's get on with the video. Okay, so as always, we start on the main menu, go to World Map. I'm on the PC, so I'm just going to left click World Map. And can you guess, 10 points for those who guess where we're taking off from. Actually, it's not going to be London City, it's going to be Gatwick Airport. I'm going to click on Gatwick, EGKK, it's not showing a name, but this is Gatwick, EGKK. Zoom to details. Going to take off from runway 8 right, 08 right. Left click there, set as departure. Zoom out. So zoom out a bit so you can see all the London landmarks, and you can see Heathrow, EGLL. Gonna zoom to details there. And zoom out a little bit. And we're gonna select 27 left, runway 27 left. Left click, set as arrival. We're also going to add a waypoint here, which is going to be Kenley Aerodrome. So I'm going to left click that and just go down to add. And that's our flight route. So I've got the Cessna 172 with the G1000 NXI. If you haven't updated the NXI mod, do that first in your content manager. So let's go back, that should stay on. Go to profile, content manager. If you've got, I've got a few things to update here, Japan, the Typhoon and Washington landmarks, I'm not too worried about these. But if the G1000 NXI is showing here, update available, update it. Go back to world map, Cessna 172 with the G1000 NXI, let's go fly. Okay, so we're set up at runway 08 right at Gatwick Airport, let's get into the cockpit. Gonna go straight down to my right G1000, so whatever keys or buttons you have set up for that, do the same. Gonna first go to the procedures button, proc. I want to set up our ILS approach. So I'm going to click the proc button, left click, and where select approach is highlighted, just click the enter button, left click, and I want to go down. Remember, we set up to land at runway 27 left. I'm going to use my FMS knob or wheel here, mouse over it, you'll see it highlighted. Use your mouse button wheel to scroll up so that highlighted box goes down to ILS 27 left. Click enter. Transitions will come up. Here's the caveat with this ILS. Some of these routes work, some don't. I found a route that works perfectly. I've flown other routes with the G1000 NXI. It doesn't work. You don't get the glide slope indicator coming up. If it doesn't work for you at your route, at your specific airport, I can't do much to help. It's almost like it's not implemented into the simulator or into the NXI mod properly yet. It's still being developed. Somebody mentioned in Discord that perhaps the frequencies are not loaded in properly into the NXI mod. That's probably something along those lines. This route I'm going to show you works, so if you want to get a taste of it, ILS, follow this route first and then try something different. I've noticed the one that works for me is the big transition, BIG. So I'm going to use my FMS knob here and scroll up. And I'm going to press the enter button here to select that transition. Use the FMS knob again to get this highlighted cursor down to the load. So I'm scrolling up on the FMS knob. Keep scrolling up. Unload and press enter. It will come up not approved for GPS. Don't worry about that, that always comes up. Just click enter. And now we've got a flight plan. I'm going to hide that flight plan, I'll come back to it in a moment. And just show you our route, how it's changed and well, it's added actually a transition, the BIG transition, which is this white line here, into Heathrow Airport, and this particular one works perfectly. Again, if it doesn't work at your airport, I'm not going to be able to help you at the moment. It's just the state of the NXI mod. It may work after this recent update. Give it a try, but give this one a go first so that you get the hang of things. I'm going to click, actually I'll scroll back in because I'll need to do this later. I'm going to click the flight plan again. And as you'll see here, it's give us projected altitudes for our various points along the flight route. So it's 7,000 up to Kenley Aerodrome. Up to this waypoint, it's 7,000. Suddenly it will drop to 6,5108. That's a funny one. Then 3,500. Then to 3,000 below. That's 2,500. It's this one, our first one, we need to take note of. That's what it wants us to be at altitude. And if you come over to your right, so to your left G1000, I hope I called that one right, mixing up my left and right there, but to your left G1000, you can see this purple number here is telling us, according to our route, what the autopilot altitude should be set at for our next waypoint. It's like our projected autopilot altitude. So I'm going to set my autopilot altitude using the Alt wheel and my mouse. Scroll up. Why has it gone to right? It does that with this recent update. It will go up by 100 rather than... So I'm going to decrease that to 0 again. There you go. And just use the inner knob to go up by increments of 1,000 to get to 7,000 feet autopilot altitude. Remember from previous videos, this is what you want your autopilot to climb to when you click the autopilot computer on. So that's all set up. I'll come to these projected altitudes later and how it changes later in the video. Another thing I want to cover is flight level change mode, which is this button, and we can set it up on the ground. If you click FLC, flight level change mode, a box will come up here with knots next to it. You use your vertical speed nose down button here to increase that figure. So let's just increase it, just for example. I'll just start this off and I'll talk more about this in a moment. I'm going to increase that. Let's click on it properly. Oh, there we go. 70, actually, one more. 77 knots. 77 knots. So now when I click autopilot, the autopilot will climb to 7,000 feet, but at a speed, a safe speed of 77 knots. This is why I am telling you about flight level change, and a lot of pilots use this in real world conditions, by the way, or real flight conditions. Instead, if I click flight level change off, and just clicked autopilot when I'm in the air, the autopilot will still climb us to 7,000 feet, but at an rate of climb decided by the autopilot. If we're climbing this high, it may climb us at too high a rate of climb, and you notice your speed will start decreasing dangerously, maybe going below 60 knots, and you're going to be in danger of stalling in certain situations. So if you click on flight level, change it instead and increase that. Let's just increase it, just for example, to 76 knots. You're now overriding the autopilot's decision of what to climb at. You're telling it to climb at a 76 knot rate of climb, so it will maintain that 76 knots regardless, which is a safer way of doing things. And whatever your nose is doing to maintain that 76 knots, whatever pitch angle your nose is doing, that will be your rate of climb. It's a funny one, it's a difficult one, a difficult theory to get your mind around. I'm going to show you this in practice later, and it should start to make more sense. The best way to look at it, the easiest way to look at it, you're just telling the autopilot what speed you would like it to climb at when it's climbing to 7,000 feet. And your rate of climb will be dependent on your speed and the pitch of your nose of your aircraft. Another thing, I'm covering quite a lot in this video, but I think it's important. These letters here, I'm not going to tell you what each one donates, but I'll tell you what that top one does, the Y. The Y is telling you whatever fuel you have in your aircraft, rather, whatever configuration you have your aircraft setting, it's telling you that 74 knots is your best rate of climb. That's the best rate of climb to do in this specific aircraft. So it's telling me 74 knots. I'm going to put my speed I want my autopilot to climb out at 74 knots. I'm going to follow those instructions. Don't worry about the rest of them, just worry about that top one. Why? What's your best rate of climb? 74 knots. The only other thing I want to cover in this video, I'm going to purposely, let's get rid of that flight plan, I'm going to purposely come away from that purple line. I'm going to fly to around here. And if I click my nav mode to lock onto my course, I'm too far away from that purple line for the autopilot to pick it up. So it can't lock onto that purple line, it can't lock onto GPS. I'm going to show you a way to get back around there under full autopilot control. People mentioned it in the last video. I didn't want to overcomplicate that one, but I want to make this one a little bit more complex so we learn more. If I'm up in the air, got autopilot on it, will climb out at 74 knots to 7,000 feet. If I click my heading button, it will follow the heading you've got set in here. Currently, by default, it's set up at 360 degrees, which is north. You can use your heading knob here to change that figure. So mousing up will move it more towards the east. Mousing down will move it more towards the west. And you can see this heading bug. Whatever you change with this figure, that heading bug will change just to show you where it is in relation to the compass. I'm going to put that back on 360. That will work in our favour. I'll show you that later. And I'm going to change the heading bug to move us back towards the purple line once we're in flight. That will make sense once we're up in the air. So let's go and do that. Okay, it's quite a murky day over Gatwick today, which is ideal for ILS conditions. So let's just throttle up and release the parking brake. Bit of torque pulling me to the right, that's pretty normal. Using my trigger buttons for my rudder on my Velocity 1. I'm enjoying using this, I've got to say it looks next gen. Couple of issues, I'm going to do a 2-week review coming up soon of me using this yoke. That's my intentions. Keep on centre line. I'm over 60 knots, so I can pull back. Remember from video 1, we want to trim up just to make sure our aircraft's in a positive rate of climb. I can come down to the left G1000, press autopilot, and watch what happens here. The aircraft's going to pitch the nose to maintain 74 knots. You can see it's slowing down, pitching the nose, so the speed slows down a little bit. It will get to around 74 knots. It will get to 74 knots and maintain it. It's getting there slowly. And the rate of climb is dependent on the pitch, the pitch of the nose of your aircraft, essentially. The way your nose is pitched on the aircraft. You can see it's pitched up here, and it's pitched in a way to maintain 74 knots, and your climb rate is dependent on that. Good thing about this is that it's not going to go under that 74 knots. It's going to maintain that speed, so you're not in danger of stalling out your aircraft or goodness knows what. And the climb rate's pretty decent, about 900 feet per minute. Now I've left it for a while, but you can see, let's range in. If I press my nav button now to follow our course, let's press it, nav mode, to turn on GPS, you can see GPS is not green, instead roll is green. It's saying I can't lock on, I'm too far away from that purple line. Here's where, actually yeah, let's move the view so you can see it, using my right POV hat switch on my velocity one. It's quite handy for that. Let's get it into range if we can. Oh, I'll tell you, it doesn't matter. Let's just click the heading select mode now. By doing this, heading will come up here. The autopilot's going to fly you to that 360 degrees, which is north. It's there. It's going to bring us up here, which will help us to intersect our line. I didn't have to turn autopilot off, and I don't want to. I want it to maintain the climb and that 74 knots rate of climb, and I want to keep my nav mode on. I want to get to that line a little bit quicker though, and this is where we can use the heading knob to reduce that number by mousing down. Let's say to around 340. So I want it to follow a heading of 340, which will get us to that line a little bit quicker. It's going to intersect that line a little bit quicker. And once it intersects that line, you'll notice that GPS will go green, which will mean it's locked on to our route. So I've gone through things pretty quickly there. I tried to go through it slow enough so that you could follow. But essentially, it's now in heading mode. So you're telling the autopilot to follow a 340 degree heading, which is coming here. Because we kept nav, we switched on nav before, GPS basically. Because we switched that on before, as soon as it reaches the line, GPS will take over and it will follow the course. It means you can actually get back to your purple line without turning autopilot off, which is quite useful. Take a quick look outside. Still pretty murky. It's ideal flight conditions for an autopilot ILS, absolutely. See if it clears up a bit later. Maybe it won't. Which, again, when we get on the glide slope, that will be ideal. If we can't see the airport properly, that's what you want. Now you can see GPS flashing, which means it's close enough to our purple line where the autopilot can now go into full GPS mode and follow our route. And we're slowly climbing, steadily climbing to our 7,000 feet altitude. Zoom out on that range just so I can see where we are. You can see our projected altitude is still 7,000. Once we get past this waypoint, Kenley Aerodrome, and past a few of these other waypoints, go to our flight plan, you can see it's going to start telling us to descend. And we've got to descend sharpish because it's only a 3 nautical mile distance to that next waypoint. And eventually down to 2,500 feet. Don't worry if you don't reach the 7,000 feet altitude on this specific flight route by this point, because the next waypoint is saying, or the next point on the course, on the route is saying it still wants you to be at 7,000 feet. It's only until we get to here that we need to worry. So don't worry if it's not quite reaching it by this point, because the next point on your route is still 7,000, so nothing to worry about. Ideally you want to reach that 7,000 feet altitude, but I'm not going to worry about it, and you don't have to on this specific flight route. Quick drink of water. So I'm just letting the autopilot do its thing at the moment. Got my snazzy Huddison, thanks to Aces again. I'm going to link his channel in the top right. For designing this, I do really like this livery. Trouble is, if I load in on this livery in a multiplayer flight, anybody flying the default Cessna 172, because they don't have my livery, even though they don't have my livery, they all show up as Huddison too, so I try not to use it in multiplayer too much. But in videos like this, it's ideal. It doesn't replace the default Cessna 172 livery, but if other people are using it in multiplayer settings, oh, the clouds suddenly cleared up, they all show up as it. Oh, the cloud layers cleared up suddenly. That was very sudden. Maybe it's just a thin line of cloud. Maybe. So we're coming past Kenley Aerodrome, you can see that. Let's get back in the cockpit. How are we doing on our altitude? Well, we're approaching 5,500, just past it. Probably not going to get to 7,000. I'm not going to worry about it. I can start messing around with decreasing my flight level. It doesn't seem to make a huge difference, in fact. If I decrease the speed I want the autopilot to maintain, so basically you're telling it to nose down a bit by decreasing your speed you want it to maintain. Okay, it's made a bit of a difference. It didn't before, and actually as you'll see it'll settle back around 700 feet. It can start to affect things if you're not careful. I'll just keep your speed the way it was at 74 knots. I've changed it now. I'm not going to change it back. As you'll see, it'll still say, even using vertical speed and trying to increase the climb rate doesn't seem to affect it. I'm not going to mess around with it. I'm purposely going to leave it, even though I just altered it to 71 knots there. It's actually climbing at a lesser rate now. Oh, okay, it's going back up. No, it's not. Yeah, so just leave it alone is my advice. If you don't reach 7,000 feet by this point, you will by the time you get to this point, which is still saying it wants to be at 7,000 feet. Don't worry about it for this particular flight, this particular route. Not sure if that's still a bug with the NXI. See, it's turning onto our next points of our course now. Not sure if it's a bug with the NXI, but yeah, altering the vertical speed to actually... So you're asking the aircraft to nose up a bit, in fact. It's not actually affecting your climb rate. So just leave it the way it is at your best rate of climb, which was 74 knots. But we'll still get there, we'll still get to 7,000 feet. I'm trying to keep this video, just trying to keep to the points I'm talking about, rather than talking about more advanced features. So just leave it the way it is. It's getting to 7,000 feet, which is fine. We've got a few points where it wants us to be at 7,000 feet. Once it gets to this point on our course, where we've got to get to 6,000 feet, I've mentioned this already, we've got to descend sharpest, so I'm going to use vertical speed, advanced warning here. Once this shows 6,000, that purple projected figure there, what it wants us to be at, wants us to be at 6,000 feet once we reach that point. Once that shows, I'm going to click on vertical speed and vertical speed down quite a few times to decrease by 1,000 feet per minute. And I've got to watch my throttle when I do that. Now we've got to our 7,000 feet altitude just fine there, and within the perimeters of the flight route. It's turning on to our next point. Gonna watch now the aircraft will speed up because I'm at full throttle. I don't have flaps, do I? No, thank goodness. I can miss that sometimes. I've got it so it loads in as default with no flaps. The Cessna 172. Start to increase. I'm going to have to pull back my throttle a bit anyway, but I'll wait till I get the warning that I'm over revving. That's when I prefer to do it. See, the moon is out there, and I can actually see the moon. I've got to wake up tomorrow morning at 5 AM. Got to get into work super early, so that's going to be fun. And if it's clear skies, I'm going to be seeing the moon quite brightly and strongly, clearly, I imagine. That's going to be fun. Anyway. Sorry, no, I've got to wake up at 5 AM, and I've got to get into work by 6 AM, which is fine. Just one of those days. So we'll let our speed stabilise here before touching anything. It's not giving us an overrev warning yet, so I'm not too worried. Okay, we've still got another point after this, 1.2 nautical miles from this point afterwards. And we'll quickly get to this point where we need to decrease. Not going to touch the altitude knob yet. Assigned altitude knob yet. Until I'm told to descend to 6,000 feet by this figure here in purple. It's basically telling you what your altitude should be at by that point, or by the next waypoint. So yeah, practice. It's not quite there yet. I think someone in the Discord mentioned that it seems as though almost the frequencies are not loading in properly into the NXI mod. And I'll go along with that. Some of these courses work, some of them don't, and the glide slope doesn't show up at all on some routes that I've tried. Although I've not tried it recently with the recent update, maybe people can inform me if that's better or not. This one works just fine, as you'll see. So I'm just drinking water there, so just practice with this one. And don't worry if you start to get symbology coming up here. Don't worry about this V, don't worry about that yet. I'm not even going to mention it in this video. When we get on our final approach to the airport, that will turn to G for our glide slope. And the glide slope indicator will start to come down to center, and I'll come to that part later. No need to talk about that yet. Am I at full throttle? I am. Okay, I'm not getting any over rev warnings, so I'm just going to leave it. Strange, okay. But I'm not going to argue with it. Wonder if I got everything set up properly. But I'm just going to leave it. I'm not going to restart the video now, and it doesn't really matter. I don't see anything wrong with the aircraft, personally. Okay. Still 7,000 feet, but it's going to get to this next waypoint quickly. It's now only 1 nautical mile, less than one nautical mile away. You'll see this change. And we've got to go sharpish on this. Vertical speed and 10 times vertical speed nose down. And you'll see a figure here, blue figure here. We want to decrease by 1,000 feet per minute to get to our 6,000 feet. If we don't make it, don't panic. Again. Anytime, any second now, 6,000 should come up. There you go, 6,000. Vertical speed. And vertical speed nose down. By 1,000 feet per minute. Let's get us down to 6,000 feet. And we've not got long to reach. It's what, 2.4 nautical miles out. We may make it, we may not. What's the next part? It wants us to climb down then to 5,000. It's actually going to jump to this, 3,500. I've done this flight before. So we'll just continue to descend. Watch the speed now. I will have to throttle back, or I will be overspeeding the aircraft. Just watch your speed when you're descending that quick. Pull your throttle back using my snazzy GA levers, which I absolutely love on the Velocity one. Fantastic feature on that. Ah, we nearly made it, Well, we are going to make it, are we? We'll get to 6,000 feet by the time we reach that waypoint. There you go. How's that? How's that? Now, it's going to want us to keep... Oh. You know what? Mistake! I didn't alter this figure. I didn't alter that figure. Now it wants us... I know, it wants us to descend... Oh, big mistake there. I should have altered that assigned altitude. Autopilot altitude. Never mind. We've descended anyway. I'm going to alter that to 3,500 because you can see in this box now, I told you it will jump to 3,500. So I'm just going to... Assigned autopilot altitude. I'm going to tell it again to descend by 1,000 feet per minute. Works out well for us. Watch my speed. Watch I don't overspeed. And the very last height restriction it wants us to be at will be around 2,500 feet later on. Just keep an eye on this figure. Whatever this figure tells you, don't do what I do. Actually amend your assigned autopilot altitude, what you want it to descend to, and then press vertical speed. I made a big mistake there. But I'll keep it in the video. Still worked out anyway. So no biggie. London landmarks ahead of us there. Ooh, lovely. Lovely, lovely. This flight, just to test it out, about an hour before this, and it was thick fog around here. Now it's cleared up, but that's okay. It means we can see our airport anyway. But it was ideal for ILS conditions. This is a lot clearer now. How are we doing? We got 2 nautical miles to our next point of our route, and it will start sending us onto our final, and goodness knows what. And you'll see a G come up here soon enough. We're descending nicely, nothing to worry about. Keep it down there, I might as well. 1.2 nautical miles out. Quick drink of water. Try not to slurp. Yeah, and like I said, give this route a try before trying others, to get the idea of what should happen, more or less. And then try it in different places, but I can't promise it will work on different routes. Wants us to climb down to 3,000 feet now. So I'm going to change our assigned autopilot altitude, like I should have done before, to 3,000. It will continue descending. That's fine. Might have to click vertical speed again, and just tell it to keep descending. If that happens, doesn't start descending, just click your vertical speed and alter this figure. I'm going to keep it at 900 feet per minute, or 1,000 feet per minute. Let's just keep it all equal. Let's not change things now. Or keep it all uniform was the word I was looking for. And we turned on to our final towards Gatwick Airport. Can we see it ahead of us? Yep, there is our runway there. Bring back the view, go back down, keep an eye on your instruments. What's it going to tell us to do next? Where's our glide slope indicator? That should be coming up soon. Once I see that and the glide slope indicator start moving towards the centre, I'm going to click on the approach button. There it is. Told you it will come up. Wants us now to climb down to 2,500. Let's just follow the instructions. Vertical speed. 500 feet per minute's enough for this, because that indicator's moving towards the centre here. And once it does, once it gets nearer to the centre, I'll just click on the approach button and glide slope will take over and the autopilot will follow the glide slope. Let's increase our vertical speed down. Keep it uniform, Hudson, 1,000 feet per minute. I can click on the approach button now. Lock will show up here. We should get a glide slope indicator coming up anytime soon. Once we get a little bit nearer, should see GS in there, which means it will be locked onto the glide slope. You can see that diamond coming down to the centre. There you go, GS. It's locked onto the glide slope. The autopilot's taken over. It will glide us in to the airport, into the runway. Isn't that lovely? I can get rid of that map now. A bit messy there by me. Not quite as perfect as I wanted it to be. One mistake in that, but even with that mistake, it still worked. So I'm not too worried. Going to decrease my throttle now because I want to get my aircraft while it's under autopilot control and while it's gliding us down to the airport, to the runway. I want to get our speed way down. So I'm just looking at this arrow here. Remember this from previous videos in this series. Get it into that white arc and I want to get this speed down, our speed down to around 86 knots. So I can afford to pull back that lever a little bit more. Just to encourage the aircraft to slow down, because we are descending on the glide slope, which the autopilot is doing for us. Little bit more, but not too much that you're going to fall out of the sky. Just be a bit careful there. And we're reaching our flaps 1 speed. Flaps. First stage of flaps. Flaps 1. First stage of flaps. 10 degrees of flaps. There we go. So that's in. Let it continue to come down till we get into the 70 knot range. And I can afford to go to flaps. Second stage of flaps. I almost said flaps 2 there. Second stage of flaps. I'm sure you know what I mean anyway. Just control that speed because it's slowing down quite a lot now. I want to keep it roughly where it is. So I'm just increasing the throttle. Which we'll do there. There we go. About 65 knots, which is okay on an approach. There we go. And there you go. As easy as that on this specific route. I've tried it on PC and Xbox. It should be okay on either. Just following what I did at the beginning there, the transition BIG or big. Enter that in as you approach your transition on the ILS 2027 left. And you should have no difficulties following this route, and then you could try it in other areas. Like I said, very hit or miss in other on other routes and in other countries and in other airports. And something to bear in mind, because I'm trying to teach a sort of back to basics with these videos, ILS is very much ground dependent. It's a ground instrumental landing system on the ground. If an airport doesn't have it, you can't do an ILS. An airport has to have the facilities at the airport to guide your aircraft in on autopilot like this. If it doesn't have it, it's no go. Although you do have the options now with visuals, of course, with the G1000 NXI. Whereas GPS and other things like that are aircraft dependent, satellite dependent rather. This is very much, ILS is very much ground dependent, and an airport has to have the facilities for you to do an ILS approach. Let's get outside. We're not being outside. Ooh, lovely. Lovely. I always love the approach to Heathrow. You've got the city behind you there. Oh. Twickenham Stadium. Ah, beautiful. Once we get over the white markers leading up to the runway, yeah, the white markers here, I shall deactivate the autopilot, so I'll hover my mouse over it. You could let the autopilot plonk you on the runway doing this, but it doesn't flare, and it's not advisable. You wouldn't do that in real life, so follow real world practices. Disengage your autopilot when you get near to the runway, and then hand fly it, is my advice. Beautiful approach, look at that. Coming over those white markers leading up to the runway, the lights. Autopilot disengage. I've got control now. I shall maintain that because it's kept us on a good profile. I'm going to decrease my throttle slightly, just so I start descending onto the runway. And I've made the runway now, so I can do a nice short landing here. And just float over the runway, nice and gently. Let it stall onto the runway, essentially. More or less like that. Brake, brake, brake. Usual stuff here. I'm not on multiplayer, so I'll stick my parking brake on, get outside. I do... Oh, and raise my flaps. I do hope that was useful to you. Give this route a try. Let me know how you get on. I can't advise on other routes because it's hit or miss, but give this specific route a try. Give the video a thumbs up if it's been helpful to you. Subscribe for many more flight simulator videos on the way, and I'll see you soon.